Welcome to A1 Storyteller, where powerful stories meet unforgettable moments. Today's story is about courage, injustice, and a reckoning no one saw coming. When a decorated elderly veteran is wrongly arrested, the law learns a hard lesson. Never underestimate family, especially when that family includes a lethal Navy SEAL grandson. Buckle up, because this one's going to leave you speechless. The quiet hero, James Pops. Reynolds had long left the battlefield behind. At 76 years old, he spent his mornings feeding birds in his front yard, sipping black coffee from a chipped Vietnam vet mug. His hands were worn, his gait slow, but his mind sharp as a tack. A retired Army staff sergeant and decorated war hero, James was known in his community as a kind soul, always ready with advice, a warm smile, and an open hand. In the small town of River Bend, Virginia, where folks still waved from porches and barbershops doubled as gossip hubs, James had become a beloved figure. He didn't say much about his time overseas, only when asked, and even then sparingly. What people did know was this: Pops had seen hell and lived to tell about it. But peace is a fragile thing, and for James, it was about to be shattered. It started on a hot, sticky southern morning. James was heading to the local corner store, cane in one hand, reusable bag in the other, to grab his usual eggs, bread, and a bottle of sweet tea. That store, Martin's, had been run by the same family for 40 years. James had shopped there for 25 of them. As he walked in, he nodded to Marcy, the clerk at the register. "Mornin', sunshine," he said with a grin. "Mornin', Pops," she replied, smiling. "You're early today." But not 5 minutes after James entered the store, 2 squad cars screeched up out front. Sirens blared, tires skidded. Officers leapt out with hands on their holsters. The calm morning air turned electric. Everyone froze. "Step away from the counter," one of the officers barked, eyes locked on James. Pops turned, confused. "Excuse me? Put your hands where I can see them, now!" Marcy looked shocked. Wait, what's going on?" James raised his hands slowly. "Gentlemen, there must be some kind of mistake." One of the officers, a young man with a shaved head and something to prove, grabbed James roughly and twisted his arm behind his back. "Don't resist!" "I'm not resisting." James winced, his cane clattering to the floor. "My shoulder." They slammed him against the freezer door, cuffed his hands behind his back, and shoved him out the door as if he were some violent threat. Onlookers watched in horror. "Sir, he's a veteran," Marcy shouted. "You've got the wrong guy." But the officers didn't care. They stuffed him into the back of the cruiser like yesterday's garbage. Pop's only words were quiet, calm, but chilling. "Call my grandson, Part 2, The Mistaken Identity." The inside of a police cruiser was colder than James remembered. It wasn't the air conditioning, it was the silence. Cold, unfeeling. Not a word was spoken as the car pulled away from Martin's corner store, leaving behind a scattered cane and a stunned crowd. James sat in the back seat, hands cuffed tightly behind him, the metal biting into old joints stiff with arthritis. The right side of his chest ached, probably bruised from when they'd slammed him into the freezer door. His left shoulder throbbed, an old injury from his second tour in Vietnam, reawakened by rough handling from a man who hadn't yet learned that real power doesn't come from a badge. The cruiser made sharp turns, not bothering to avoid potholes. James grunted with each bump, but said nothing. Officer Jenkins, the rookie with the shaved head, sat behind the wheel, his partner beside him. They were young, maybe too young, still high on the adrenaline of what they thought was a big bust. Bell finally broke the silence. "You think he's the guy?" "Same build, same jacket, dark skin. It matches the APB." Jenkins replied, eyes on the road. James spoke for the first time, his voice calm, measured. "So, you're telling me that's all it takes now? Build, jacket, skin?" Jenkins looked at him in the mirror. "Don't talk, sir. You have the right to remain silent." James scoffed. "I earned the right to speak freely 50 years ago in the jungles of Southeast Asia." Jenkins didn't reply. but James saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Booking and bruises at the Riverbend Police Department. James was pulled out of the cruiser like a sack of grain. His shoulder gave again. He stumbled. "Up!" Bell barked. James steadied himself. "I can walk. I ain't a criminal." "You'll get your day in court." "Court? For what?" Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as they fingerprinted him, took his photo and filled out a report riddled with inaccuracies. Name: James Reynolds. Age: 76. Race: black. Suspected crime: armed robbery. Location: Exxon gas station, Highway 7. Time: 8:42 a.m. James shook his head. "I was at Martin's store at 8:30. Ask the clerk. The store has cameras." Jenkins didn't answer. He just handed the paperwork to the desk sergeant and led James down a corridor lined with holding cells. Steel bars, cold concrete. A bench bolted to the wall. They locked him in. James sat down slowly, his joints cracking beneath him. He looked around, nothing but silence and shadows. He'd seen worse. But this was different. In the war, he knew who the enemy was. Now it seemed they wore uniforms just like his once did. Meanwhile, the evidence that wasn't back at the Exxon station, the actual robbery had been amateurish at best. The suspect had brandished what appeared to be a kitchen knife and taken about $400 in cash. The store's grainy security footage showed a man in a green military item jacket and black cap, both items James happened to be wearing that morning. But there was a problem. The footage was from a low angle, partially obscured by a shelf. The man's face wasn't visible, only the vague shape of his frame and clothing. Still, the APB had gone out. Possible suspect: black male, mid to late 60s, green fatigue jacket, black baseball cap. That was it. That was all it took for Jenkins and Bell to burst into Martin's without even verifying a timeline or location. James had never even been near Highway 7 that morning. But the system wasn't built to believe him first. The captain finds out. At around 11:20 a.m., Captain Wyatt was in his office sipping lukewarm coffee and flipping through shift schedules when his secretary, Linda, poked her head in. "Cap, you better see this. Jenkins and Bell brought someone in." "James Reynolds." Wyatt paused. "Wait, Pops Reynolds, the old vet?" "Yep." He shot up from his chair, heart thudding. "Why?" "Robbery suspect." "You're kidding." "Nope." Said he matched the description, booked him and everything. Wyatt muttered a curse under his breath and stormed out of his office. Down the hallway he passed the booking desk, locked eyes with Jenkins and motioned toward the interrogation room. "In there. Now." Jenkins followed, suddenly unsure of himself. Once the doors shut, Wyatt exploded. "Do you have any idea what you've done? That man is a pillar in this community. He matched the APB cap, jacket cap build. You think Pops Reynolds is knocking over gas stations with a kitchen knife at 8:30 in the morning? Are you insane?" Jenkins opened his mouth to speak, but Wyatt raised a hand to stop him. "You're off the case, effective immediately, and if it turns out he's innocent, you'll be damned lucky if all you get is a suspension." Jenkins paled. Wyatt walked out, furious. James in the cell. 2 hours passed. James sat quietly in the holding cell, back against the wall, hands on his knees. His breathing was steady, controlled, but his mind a storm. He had fought for this country not once but twice, watched brothers die beside him in the mud, came home to a divided America that still didn't want him in the front of a bus, and now this? After everything? He had to bite his tongue when a rookie cop half his age threw him in a cruiser like garbage. He'd seen boys like that before, barking louder to hide the fear, mistaking aggression for strength. He exhaled slowly, then whispered one line. "Call my grandson," the whisper that traveled in. The outer office, Linda, the captain's secretary, had heard everything. She'd known Pops Reynolds for over 20 years. He used to bring her cookies during the holidays, the real kind, homemade with pecans. So when she heard that quiet voice asking for his grandson, she made a choice. While Jenkins sulked in the hallway and Wyatt tried to get legal on the line, Linda slipped into a corner, pulled out her cell phone, and called Marcy at the corner store. "You were there this morning, right?" "Yeah," Marcy said. "It was awful. You know Pops asked us to call his grandson?" "Yeah. I got his contact from the neighborhood watch. He's some kind of soldier, right?" Linda paused. "Something like that. You have his number?" "Just texted it to you." Linda hung up. Her hands shook a little as she dialed the number. She didn't even know why. Maybe it was intuition, or maybe it was the tone in James's voice when he said, "Call my grandson." 3 rings, then voicemail. But she left a message anyway. "Hi, Mr. Reynolds? Your grandfather James has been arrested. He's okay, but they hurt him. You need to come quick." She hung up and stared at the phone for a moment, her gut twisting. Something told her that phone call would change everything. Part 3. A grandson's return. The sun dipped low over the tree line as a sleek black Dodge Charger tore down Highway 29. Behind the wheel was Malik Reynolds, Navy SEAL, son of discipline, and grandson of a man who'd just been disrespected by the very people he'd once fought to protect. Malik wasn't the type to panic. His breathing stayed calm. His grip on the steering wheel was relaxed, but his eyes were locked in, scanning every detail of the road ahead like it was a battlefield. The voicemail from Linda had been short, but it was enough. "Your grandfather's been arrested. They hurt him. Come quick." That was all Malik needed to hear. He hadn't been home to Riverbend in 3 years. Duty always called. Black ops in Eastern Europe, hostage rescues in the Gulf, counter-terror operations in Latin America, but nothing could have prepared him for this call. Pops wasn't just his grandfather. He was his rock, his compass, the man who taught him honor before the military ever did. So when he parked outside the Riverbend General Hospital, Malik didn't hesitate. He stormed through the lobby like he belonged there, his broad shoulders cutting through space like a blade through fabric. The nurse at the desk tried to stop him. "Sir, you can't just—" He paused long enough to flash a steely look. "Room 38 now." She pointed without another word. Inside room 308, James "Pops" Reynolds lay on the hospital bed, eyes half shut but still full of fire. His face bore a thin cut across his cheekbone. His shoulder was wrapped, bruised dark purple. He looked older than Malik remembered, but no less strong. "Pops," Malik said, voice low. James opened his eyes, and for the first time in a long while he smiled. "Took you long enough." Malik walked over and gently placed a hand on his grandfather's. "They touched you?" James nodded. Boys didn't know the difference between a criminal and a veteran. They just saw this skin and a jacket. Malik's jaw clenched. "They'll regret that." "I don't need revenge," James said. "I need respect." Malik's voice was ice. "I'll make sure they remember both your name and your scars." Part 4. Into the Lion's Den. The next morning, Malik stood in front of the Riverbend Police Department. He didn't wear his medals or military uniform. He didn't need to. His presence alone sent a ripple through the station the moment he walked in. Years of combat had taught him how to read people in seconds, and right now he saw fear behind false confidence. At the front desk sat Officer Jenkins, the same one who had slammed Pops into a freezer, cracked a rib, and smiled doing it. Malik walked up, slow, steady. "You, Jenkins?" The officer looked up, chewing gum. "Who's asking?" "Malik Reynolds." The name hit Jenkins like a brick. "I'm here about James Reynolds, the man you assaulted." Jenkins stood up, feigning control. "If you've got a complaint, you can file it through—" Malik leaned in, his voice a whisper that froze the air. "I've dismantled warlords with fewer resources than you. You broke the bones of a 76-year-old veteran. If he'd died, you'd already be in the ground, but lucky for you, he raised me better than that." Before Jenkins could answer, the captain of the department, Charles Wyatt, emerged from his office, having already heard the tension boiling. "Mr. Reynolds," Wyatt said cautiously, "I was hoping to speak with you." Malik didn't move. "Then speak." Wyatt gestured toward his office, in private. Inside the captain's office, Wyatt closed the door gently. "I want to say first, I respect your grandfather. He's a decorated veteran. I didn't know until after the arrest. I was out of the loop." "Convenient," Malik replied. Wyatt sighed. "I saw the arrest report. It doesn't look good. I'm not proud of how it was handled." "I don't want your shame, Captain," Malik said coolly. "I want the truth, the footage, the body cams, pull them up." Wyatt hesitated. "I don't think—" "Pull them up." Malik's tone carried the weight of command, not a request but a final warning. Wyatt relented and typed into his system, pulling up the files. 2 video feeds from Jenkins and Bell's body cams loaded side by side on the monitor. The footage began. There was Pops walking through Martin's store, calm, harmless, holding a carton of eggs. Then came the explosion, the door flying open, cops yelling, their guns drawn. Over a carton of eggs, the shoving, the tackle, the scream of pain as Pops hit the tile. Malik watched, face unreadable. But when he saw Jenkins smirk after cuffing his grandfather, his nostrils flared. Wyatt paused the video. "I've already called Internal Affairs," he said quickly. "They'll open an inquiry." Malik pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" Wyatt asked. "Making sure this doesn't die in some back office." He recorded the screen as the footage played. "Mr. Reynolds, I can't let you... You want me to not record the proof of your department assaulting a 76-year-old vet? I'd love to hear you say that on camera." Wyatt stayed silent. Malik stopped recording and looked him dead in the eye. "You buried the wrong man. You forgot whose blood runs in my veins. That video? It's going online. And when the world sees it, they'll remember my grandfather's name." Later that night, Firestorm, Malik uploaded the video with a short caption. "My grandfather is a U.S. war hero. The Riverbend PD arrested him, slammed him to the ground, and broke his shoulder for matching a description. He didn't commit a crime. His only offense was being black in a green jacket. Share this, make them see." Justice for Pops. It went viral in hours. Within the first 6,000 views, it hit a nerve. Veterans groups reposted it. Civil rights leaders called for accountability. News stations reached out to Malik for interviews. Hashtags exploded: "Respect our vets," "Justice for Pops," "Riverbend exposed." The video hit 3 million views by midnight. Outside the Riverbend PD, a small crowd had gathered, candles in hand, signs raised high. One sign read, "He served America." Who's serving him now? By sunrise, Riverbend wasn't the same town anymore. The once quiet community had become a focal point of national outrage. Local news vans lined the streets outside the police station. Protesters gathered, waving signs that read, "He served, they hurt. Veterans deserve justice. And we are James Reynolds." Malik stood silently at the edge of the growing crowd, eyes scanning everything. He wasn't there to chant or wave a sign. His mission was surgical, focused. He wanted accountability, and he wanted it publicly. Inside the station, pressure had turned to panic. Captain Wyatt's phone rang non-stop. The mayor, the state attorney, the governor's office, even reporters from major news networks. He knew the body cam footage had gone viral, but he hadn't expected the story to hit this hard. He especially hadn't expected the response from military circles. Veterans from every branch flooded social media with their own messages. "That man fought for you, now fight for him. I wore that jacket. You gonna tackle me too? We don't forget how you treat our elders." It wasn't just a scandal anymore, it was a symbol. That afternoon, Malik held a press conference. No podium, no official permission, just him standing on the courthouse steps, with Pops beside him, one hand on the cane, the other gripping Malik's wrist like a lifeline. Reporters leaned in, cameras zoomed, and Malik, standing tall in a plain black t-shirt and jeans, spoke with the authority of a man who had faced real war and now faced something just as dangerous: institutional silence. "My grandfather is a decorated war hero," Malik said. "He served this country with pride, dignity, and honor. But when he walked into a store last week, none of that mattered. All they saw was a threat." He paused, letting the silence speak. "No man, let alone a veteran, should be brutalized in his own hometown for doing nothing wrong. This isn't just about my grandfather. This is about every black man who's ever been mistaken for a suspect before he's seen as a citizen." The crowd roared in agreement. Malik continued, "I've spent the last decade defending this country abroad. Now I'm defending my family right here on U.S. soil. And I'm not leaving until we get justice. Full justice." The pressure had become unbearable. Riverbend was boiling under the heat of national scrutiny, and the town's leadership was feeling it in full force. Behind closed doors, meetings turned to shouting matches, and faces that once smiled for ribbon cuttings now stayed hidden behind closed blinds. Inside City Hall, the mayor sat red-faced and exhausted, nervously wiping sweat from his brow as officials read out the growing list of demands from citizens, veterans organizations, and legal advocates. Internal affairs investigators had already started pulling files from the police department, and the results were damning. Complaints long swept under the rug began to resurface, allegations of racial profiling, excessive force, and intimidation, all pinned to the same names. Officer Jenkins' name came up over and over, his conduct swept under the protection of silence, until now. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. Officer Jenkins, the man who had thrown Pops to the ground without a shred of hesitation, was suspended indefinitely without pay pending an official investigation. His partner, Sergeant Bell, was removed from patrol and reassigned to a desk pending further review. The public wanted more. So did Malik. At a town press conference, Police Captain Wyatt stood stiffly at the podium, voice trembling as he issued a formal apology to James Reynolds and the community. He called it a terrible error, blamed lack of training, and promised reforms. But Malik wasn't interested in band-aid solutions. He stepped up after Wyatt and spoke with fire in his chest and control in his voice. He demanded real changes: mandatory body camera rules that couldn't be tampered with, an independent civilian review board to oversee use of force cases, and a formal citywide apology to all black veterans who had been mistreated by the very system they served. The crowd erupted in support. For the first time in decades, Riverbend wasn't just listening, it was being forced to reckon with itself. The crack in the dam came from the last place anyone expected. Sergeant Bell, the quieter of the two officers, the one who had stood by silently as Jenkins took charge, finally spoke out. Days after being placed on administrative leave, he agreed to sit down for an interview with a national news outlet. Sitting across from the anchor in a modest, well-lit studio, Bell looked like a man carrying the weight of choices he could no longer defend. With cameras rolling and the country watching, he broke the code of silence that had kept departments like Riverbend's operating unchecked for years. "We didn't stop him because he looked dangerous," Bell admitted, voice low, hands trembling slightly. "We stopped him because we were told to watch certain types. That meant poor black and alone. That's how it's always been unofficially. No one writes it down, but everyone knows." The anchor leaned in, giving him space to continue. "I didn't agree with how Jenkins handled it. I didn't say anything either. And that's on me. I should have spoken up then, but I'm doing it now." The interview aired that night. The impact was instant. Across Riverbend and beyond, people watched a uniformed officer acknowledge what black residents had said for years: that bias wasn't just random, it was systemic. The interview went viral. Civil rights leaders praised the honesty while condemning the system that made such silence normal. Bell's confession shifted the conversation. It wasn't just about one elderly man anymore. It was about a department and a society that valued control over justice. And the people of Riverbend, once resigned to quiet frustration, now found their voice rising in unison. Weeks passed and slowly Riverbend began to change. The protests had calmed but not disappeared. They had transformed from anger into action. Community forums were held in churches, schools, and local parks. Black veterans were invited to speak about their experiences. White allies stood beside them, listening, learning, and for the first time, truly understanding. One of the town's oldest parks was renamed Reynolds Veterans Memorial Park. At the front gate stood a bronze statue of James Reynolds, cast from an old military photo, chest out, face determined, one hand resting gently on a folded American flag. Children played nearby, tourists snapped pictures, and locals, young and old, nodded in respect as they passed. Malik walked alongside his grandfather one warm afternoon. Their shadows stretched long in the golden light. Pops moved with a stronger stride now. The bruises were gone, but the memory lived in every careful step. They paused at the statue, silence stretching between them like an unspoken promise. "You see that?" Pops murmured, eyes scanning the plaque below his name. "Never thought I'd live to see something like this." Malik nodded, his voice low. "You didn't just survive it, you changed it." Pops smiled, the lines in his face deepening. "No," he said quietly, "we did." Malik placed his hand on the bronze shoulder of the statue, then looked up at the clear blue sky. He had fought wars across the globe, but this, standing here with his grandfather, in the town that once tried to break him, this was the battle that mattered most, a battle not of bullets, but of truth. And they had won, not with vengeance, but with honor. And so, in a town that forgot the value of its own heroes, one man's quiet dignity and another man's fierce loyalty shook the pillars of injustice to their core. They tried to silence a legacy with cold steel and cruel hands. But what they didn't know was that the legacy they struck was protected by blood, by courage, and by a warrior's will. This was never just about an arrest. It was about awakening, and once you wake a lion, you better pray it never remembers who wronged its pride. This has been another unforgettable story from A1 Storyteller, where the truth hits hard and justice hits harder. If this story moved you, share it, like it, and subscribe for more powerful, real-life inspired tales that shine a light where others try to hide the truth. Until next time, stay alert and always stand up for what's right.